Hello, good afternoon. I hope you had a good lunch. Thanks for joining. We're going to talk about new monetary order. So in this presentation, we'll review the different moving pieces of the chessboard of a new monetary system that's shaping up in a changing world. We'll look at the different pieces of the puzzle, various financial instruments, the players, trends, and plans, aiming to make sense of the landscape these days, which is not easy. So this is more or less what it looks like. I hope your head will not be spinning by the end of this talk. All right, so a bit of background. Historically, every 80 to 110 years, we see a change in world empires. At the end of every cycle, we experience crises, emergencies, wars, and turbulence. The Fourth Turning book describes this recurring pattern well. It seems that extending the dollar hegemony for another cycle into the digital age is the mission of the current US administration. In my humble opinion, the US will do everything, or many things, to interrupt this pattern and continue acting as the world's empire with a reserve currency for another cycle. So, check this out.
What underpins a world order is always the financial system. I was very privileged. My father was an advisor to Nixon when they came off the gold standard in '71, and so I was brought up with a kind of inside view of how very important the financial structure is to absolutely everything else. And what we're seeing in the world today, I think, is we are on the brink of a dramatic change where we are about to, and I'll say this boldly, we're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting and introduce a new one. And the new one, the new accounting, is what we call blockchain. It means digital. It means having a almost perfect record of every single transaction that happens in the economy, which will give us far greater clarity over what's going on. It also raises huge dangers in terms of the balance of power between states and citizens. In my opinion, we're going to need a digital constitution of human rights if we're going to have digital money. But also, this new money will be sovereign in nature. Most people think that digital money is crypto and private. But what I see are superpowers introducing digital currency. The Chinese were the first. The US is on the brink, I think, of moving in the same direction. The Europeans have committed to that as well.
So Dr. Pippa Malmgren tells us exactly what the plan is back in 2022. These days, we see experiments in full speed to bring up this new reality to life. Whether implemented through CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, state-regulated stablecoins, and/or tokenized assets or deposits on the blockchain, countries are racing to implement their digital financial system, which should, if all goes according to plan, interact with other countries. Many globalist organizations hold the mission of designing what the future of humanity should look like. Some of the public ones you may know include the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, etc. They love the public-private partnership model and design agendas such as the UN's Agenda 2030, for example, which is a global plan of action for the world. 193 countries signed it in 2015 in New York, and they're all obliged to implement it. It is a global framework for international cooperation and to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure prosperity for all, covering all areas of life. Sounds great. It's made up of 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Unfortunately, the deeper you dive into this, the more you realize it's a plan that aspires to tighten control over humanity while eliminating individuality and human rights. Wrapped up in nice, innocent language, this agenda is a collectivist plan that benefits the world's powers that be. In order to continue pushing the fiat economy forward, it needs major drivers such as pandemics and big pharma, AI and big tech, war and military industries, and of course, climate emergencies with big budgets for climate action. The World Economic Forum envisions your digital ID in the center of your life. I've marked here a few areas related to finance, and essentially being identified digitally sits at the core of today's financial trends. In simple terms, if the state knows who you are and what you do with your finances, it allows you to function. The digital ID is a key pillar in Agenda 2030. ID 2020 is a public-private partnership tasked with shaping the future of digital identity.
The UN estimates that 10 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals cannot be met without first closing the identity gap.
Now, while preparing this talk, it was clear to me, or it became clear to me, that financial players are trying to piece a really big puzzle in cyberspace. And the more they try to grab control of floating pieces, the more they understand how big and complicated the task is. At the same time, somewhere in the background, if you listen carefully, you'll hear a tick-tock, another Bitcoin block is created for about 15 years now. So let's unpack some of the building blocks that most probably will play a role in this new monetary order. Let's take a look at the regulators and financial institutions' favorable trends versus what is less favorable. It's like a buffet of financial instruments, from tokenized assets and deposits, to stablecoins, to central bank digital currencies, to KYC Bitcoin, ETFs, and strategic Bitcoin reserves. They all play a role in various stages. Cash, your non-KYC Bitcoin, that's what criminals do in the eyes of the state. So as long as you're identified and the relevant institution grants you permission, you're good to go. A few trends expedite the rollout of centralized digital currencies. One is strengthening of the BRICS bloc and de-dollarization, closing banks and de-banking, reducing cash and privacy. I think here in Australia you know it quite well. And governments want to hold on to their money monopoly, and Bitcoin is a threat. Now, when you look at digital currencies as potential weapon on the global map, you understand that as more nations adopt digital alternatives, they gain greater ability to bypass Western-led regulations. Now, in regards to CBDCs, let's look at that. Central bank digital currencies. I believe they act as the Overton window of financial control. Retail CBDCs are the extreme dystopian end of this window, and other monetary tools are less dystopian and more palatable and digestible. If you read between the lines, you'll notice that in countries where retail CBDCs are ruled out, other centralized monetary tools are promoted. CBDC projects are slower to roll out. There we go. According to a new survey of 34 central banks, 31% of them have delayed plans to issue retail CBDC. However, as seen in this graph, in the last 3 years, 60+% of central banks did not change their minds about CBDCs, and they're going ahead as planned, or even more inclined than before. But while retail CBDC is slower to launch, wholesale CBDC with cross-border implementations are on the go, and we'll review a few examples today. But first, stablecoins. Stablecoins are the bridge between cryptocurrencies and traditional finance, and they're expanding rapidly. Stablecoins are cryptocurrencies designed to maintain a stable value by being pegged one-to-one to a reserve asset like fiat currency. More than 70 projects were featured in a recent report about bank-issued stablecoins and tokenized deposits. These are all solid players in the new digital monetary system. Central banks are threatened that stablecoins are becoming the new operating system for money, doing to traditional finance what the internet did to Barnes & Noble. Hence, the trend is to accept and regulate stablecoins as soon as possible. A few data points about stablecoins. The stablecoins' daily transaction volume exceeds $60 billion today, US dollars. JP Morgan coin JP Morgan has a coin for about 5 years now. The transaction volume exceeds $1 billion per day. Tether is now the 18th largest holder of US Treasuries with $103 billion and $140 billion in USDT in circulation. Most stablecoins, about 98%, are pegged to the dollar. So while retail CBDC may not happen in some countries, in the US for example, centralized stablecoins could serve as a type of CBDC if they're well regulated and programmed, further globalizing the dollar. The new US legislation in progress is Genius Act in laying out a framework for stablecoins.
Stablecoins really have the potential to ensure American dollar dominance internationally, to increase the usage of the US dollar digitally as the world's reserve currency, and in the process create potentially trillions of dollars of demand for US Treasuries, which could lower long-term interest rates.
This used to be called a conspiracy theory not long ago, okay? And now he's actually saying it out loud. The first subcommittee for digital assets came together last week in the US, and it revolved mainly around stablecoins and how to regulate them and expand the US Banking Secrecy Act to stablecoins as well. Now, let's explore more examples. Cambodia permits banks and payment institutions to issue and use stablecoins while they ban Bitcoin and recently blocked 16 major exchanges. In Brazil, stablecoins use is on the rise as citizens are increasingly hedging against their plummeting currency, but there's a new proposal to ban transactions of stablecoins, like USDT, to self-custodian wallets. Even if passed, this ban will be hard to enforce. Another piece of the monetary puzzle is tokenization. Tokenizing deposits, tokenizing assets like stocks and bonds, as well as real estate, followed by carbon and natural resources.
Let me be clear. I think ETFs are step one in the technological revolution in the financial markets. Step two is going to be the tokenization of every financial asset. And to me, this is where we believe it's going. So we're looking at Bitcoin, we're looking at ETFs in the same manner. These are technological changes that can allow us to move forward, and we have them.
So far, we're not seeing new retail CBDC implementations coming out, and there's a clear pushback on CBDC in the US. The good news about CBDC is that people's concerns about privacy and programmability put pressure on central banks to rethink retail CBDCs in some countries, like in the case of Thailand. Wholesale CBDC, however, is on the rise, most notably cross-border use cases to improve settlements, with around 44 such pilots at play.
The hype was focused on the retail CBDC space. And a lot of that hype has not played out because despite all the pilots, and we did them too, we were quite active in the CBD space for quite a while, and we did retail pilots. We have very good retail payments infrastructure already. So the additional benefit of having retail CBDC is not entirely clear. So I think that combination of not having a very clear use case, plus the concerns that people have, like on the privacy and whatnot, have caused a healthy skepticism about when we're likely, if we're likely to see stuff happen in terms of a full production rollout of retail CBDC. Okay. That is different from wholesale CBDC. We at the Bank of Thailand, probably other central banks, think the same way, that the use case are much clearer, and also that the downsides and the risks of wholesale CBDC are so much lower. So a much more compelling case for taking wholesale CBDC to production.
Now, listen to this guy from the Central Bank of Singapore on how hard it is to reinvent the wheel.
Very quickly, we came to the conclusion that it needed a horizontal foundational digital infrastructure to enable that interoperability across networks, across assets, and across currencies, because this represents, the most significant opportunity to reap the full benefits of asset tokenization. So on the one hand, there's the public blockchain, right? It has a global network, right, which is there, but for accountability reasons, right, and governance reasons, You can't reasonably expect, regulated FIs to put high-value transactions through on a daily basis, right? Then on the other hand, FIs themselves come up with their private permissioned networks, but on a FI-specific basis, can't scale. So then we landed in between, which is what we call the public permissioned network, which is public blockchain equivalent infrastructure serving the regulated wholesale financial market space.
You can't expect us to, right? FIs, financial institutions. Basically, when central bankers got to the wholesale CBDC part, they understood they need a common framework to work on. So they took a step back to the planning stage, and the Central Bank of Singapore, with 24 financial institutions, came up with GL1, Global Layer 1, a multi-year initiative to develop standards, practices, and principles of digital infrastructure for tokenized assets. For the transformation of the financial industry, Layer 1 rings a bell? Back to Thailand. Siam Commercial Bank has launched Thailand's first cross-border payment system powered by stablecoins, running on a public blockchain, while other Thai banks also implemented remittances with stablecoins. Hong Kong seems to be leading the way in piloting wholesale CBDC. Also in Hong Kong, a new stablecoin bill is on the table. And between multiple countries, Project Ensemble was launched 5 months ago to support experimentation with tokenization and wholesale CBDC. The EU is experimenting on a distributed ledger technology to interconnect 48 countries' central banks, while continuing with the rollout of retail CBDC.
Another significant development on the horizon is our digital euro. We are in the preparation phase, and we are expecting European legislation. Once that is done, we will decide whether we move forward with developing a digital form of cash. Your digital euro.
Your digital euro. So the taxpayer euros are invested into more propaganda campaigns to keep the normie public trusting central banks.
Do you want to know more about the digital euro? Let's find out more. Evelyn, in 20 seconds, can you answer our questions? Why do we need a digital euro?
Well, our currency needs to keep up with how we want to pay. So currently, more than half of the people prefer to pay digitally, and there is not one single European way to do so. The digital euro would fill that gap.
Yay.
What would I...
Oh, that's so wonderful, right? Advertisement, that taxpayers' money goes to propaganda. India is one of the few countries that have launched both wholesale and resale CBDCs with 5 million plus users, 16 banks, and 4 million merchants. CBDC has the potential to underpin the payment system of the future, both for domestic and cross-border payments, says the Bank of India recently. India's central bank partners with fintech firms to expand the digital rupee. With a user base of 180 million people, they will act as entry points for public access to CBDC. Through their new e-wallet Android app, which mandates video verification and significant restrictions such as a daily transaction cap of $577 and $115 limit per transaction. India is also going cashless incredibly fast. India's IndusInd Bank ran programmable CBDC pilot last year. 50 farmers have received payment with programmable money in return for recycling agricultural waste and generating carbon credits, while the programmed funds are restricted on how they can be spent. But a digital currency with very few takers is pushed via subsidies, such as student loans, for example. The trend of going cashless is inevitable, but we won't abolish cash, don't worry, says the head of CBDC project in Israel Central Bank, which last week published a 110-page initial design document for a two-tier CBDC system, wholesale plus retail. They promise there will be privacy up to a certain level, no expiry date, and no programmability. That's what they promise, right?
Having CBDC.
I'm skipping that. Back to Thailand. So while they allegedly dropped retail CBDC, they shortly after announced a new pilot in Phuket to accept KYC Bitcoin. And they're considering Bitcoin ETFs as well. Thailand stresses it's on the path to a digital financial transformation. Remember, this message, this 10 minutes warning, oh my God, this is creepy. Thailand stresses it's on the path to a digital financial transformation. Remember this message. Many leaders use it to describe their position in the race to a new monetary order, digital financial transformation. In Malaysia, same message. Prime Minister says Malaysia must embark on a digital transformation within its economic and financial sectors, prioritizing blockchain and cryptocurrency to remain at the forefront of the digital age. After a few pilots in 2024, the Reserve Bank of Australia pivoted its focus to wholesale CBDCs because it found no clear public interest case to issue retail CBDC in Australia. However, this decision will be revisited in the future. It's in their document. I've read the document. It's boring. At the same time, Project Acacia is in progress for wholesale CBDC, and RBA, the Royal Bank of Australia, is very interested in regulated Australian dollars-backed stablecoins or tokenized deposits, which are a great replacement for CBDCs. So Australia is going cashless pretty heavily, I don't need to tell you that, and with a possible digital identity bill, the pieces of the puzzle are coming together. Similarly to other countries, the new administration in the US carries a familiar narrative, American leadership in digital financial tech. Now, while Trump still vouches to ban CBDCs, he is green-lighting dollar-backed stablecoins, and his administration is working on regulating them. Crypto holding, mining, trading is perfectly legal now, and the US will develop a national stockpile. That's the promise. SAB 121 was repealed, which will allow banks to custody crypto, which is a significant change, and I plan to chat about that with Peter Dunworth soon in a podcast that I will interview him. I didn't have time to update the deck, but yesterday Trump announced the executive order to turn confiscated Bitcoin into a strategic Bitcoin reserve with an option to buy more from crypto profits. This will send a clear signal to other nation states and corporations to follow suit with a strategic Bitcoin reserve as a digital commodity and store of value. Last month, Russian companies have begun using Bitcoin and other digital currencies in international trades in order to counter Western sanctions. Russia also legalized mining and is one of the global leaders in Bitcoin mining. However, Russia still tries to control Bitcoin through mining, proposing a registry on mining hardware. It feels like nation-states' penny starting to drop, with a growing discussion about including Bitcoin as a strategic reserve, a move pioneered by El Salvador and keeps proving itself. In the US, 32 states have now introduced strategic Bitcoin reserves legislation, which is a hopeful trend, and Senator Lummis' bill is still on the table for more Bitcoin acquisitions for the US. We see politicians in the EU calling for a similar move, so far without much success. On the left you have France, in the middle Germany, and on the right the only success so far in Czech Republic, where not only tax exemption for holders of minimum 3 years, but also prohibiting banks to discriminate against Bitcoin holders. Furthermore, Czech central bank governor proposed building up a Bitcoin reserve with up to 5% of the balance sheet. This is good news. At the same time, the buffet breakfast always has good and bad dishes, and with their free will, world leaders are experimenting with shitcoinery and scammery. No explanation needed on that, right? Unfortunately, El Salvador recently changed its Bitcoin law to repeal Bitcoin as legal tender, yet in many ways it's still leading the way. A lot of noise and risk was prevented from El Salvador by embracing Bitcoin-only reserve that keeps shitcoinery and scammery away. The corporate world is also waking up waking up to Bitcoin. 70 plus public companies collectively hold almost 600,000 Bitcoin as treasury reserves, and that's without the many other private companies. This wave will continue to grow. Let's take a look at another piece of the puzzle, carbon markets. I'll do that one quick, driven by climate agenda. They could act as an important piece of the new digital monetary order. Remember Agenda 2030 and its goals? Climate plays a big role in this agenda. It affects all other sustainable development goals, including the new monetary order. It's used as the excuse to enact more control over the population and to drive the economy forward.
Climate change is still on top of the global agenda. From decarbonizing to nature-based solutions, from building a circular economy to developing nature credits, the Paris Agreement continues to be the best hope for all humanity.
So important. While Ursula thinks Paris agreements are critical, Trump seems to think otherwise, pulling the US out. Maybe then it's not a surprise to see world leader calling for a financial reset. French President Macron said in 2023 that the world needs a public financial shock to fight global warming. A product that was fortunately taken off the market about 4 years ago was MasterCard's Do Black card that monitors and limits consumption related to carbon emissions.
Do Black, the world's first credit card with a carbon limit. Simply put, it's the first credit card ever to stop you from overspending. Not based on your available funds, but rather on the levels of CO2 emissions caused by your consumption. Do Black helps you track your climate impact and ensures that you reduce it by 50% in line with the UN 2030 recommendation.
The core purpose of Do Black is not only the ability to measure the impact of your consumption, but also bringing it to a direct halt, making it a radical tool against climate change.
This is real. It's not AI. This is real, but it was taken off the market. Another area in development is how to bring this agenda to our personal wallets, taxing and limiting us. Programmed, regulated money can be very useful to implement this vision.
We're developing through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
We're working on it. Stay tuned. I have only 2 minutes left, so I'm going to skip some other examples. But be sure that this is all happening. Carbon market is on the rise. Carbon deals, more carbon deals. This is very useful in a new monetary order. Yes, okay. So, you see, the fiat system inevitably dictates a race, one that we're all taking part in. Fiat incentivizes everyone involved in the creation of money to print as much as they can and to extract resources while at it. This is what it looks like when greedy, power-hungry bureaucrats play this game wildly on the account of the peasants and Mother Nature.
Today, carbon pricing, ETSs, carbon taxes already cover about 25% of global emissions, right? We should actually look at scaling this, right, to cover all 100% of carbon emissions. And beyond carbon, let's think about other aspects of nature that are easier to quantify. We probably will not be able to quantify everything on day one, but what about water, right? That's also quite possible for us to start integrating systematically into current trading carbon pricing mechanisms.
Right. So there's no doubt, I'm going to skip this lady.
We partnered.
She owns the science. There's no doubt the future of financial system is digital, using blockchain and other technologies as long as they're as long as they're centralized, identified, and permissioned. It seems like traditional finance is going fully digital, trying to reinvent the Bitcoin wheel in their flavor. It's not an easy task, and they may succeed given enough time and public consent. While cash continues to allow a level of privacy, it has its known fiat shortcomings. Peer-to-peer Bitcoin essentially remains the only possible way to maintain self-custody, self-sovereignty, and financial freedom. The long-term challenge all central banks are facing is achieving a unification of settlement infrastructure, which can explain the long duration to launch their CBDCs. They are trying to create a unified ledger, something that every Bitcoiner here knows that Bitcoin solves from day one. Reinventing the wheel is not easy, and Bitcoin has the front-runner advantage as long as its network continues to be secured and decentralized. We'll continue watching to understand how this unfolds. And as Hayek said, if there is a way to introduce something governments can't stop, we stand a chance in having good money once again. Thank you very much, and please follow my work in the QR code.